Opening report in ChessBase 26 may be the major innovation in the new program. Let's find a nice starting position to generate an opening report, and we do this with our trusted Sicilian Najdorf mainline Poisoned Pawn variation. And we click on report, opening report, or alternatively we could right click on the board and call the opening report from here, or even do it via keyboard shortcut with Ctrl-Shift-E, which gives us a lot of choices at the beginning to configure this report. Some of the functions in the report take time because they use engine analysis. And if you want to have your report finished for a quick overview of the statistics in a few seconds, then you would switch off all the analysis functions here, especially the tactics generation, the extraction of typical tactical games. But we want to demonstrate everything, so we need to be a bit patient while we generate this. And I click OK. And now I got to keep talking a bit, not to bore you while the opening report is generated with all those engine analysis. Okay, we can see what it's doing. It has identified, obviously, the main lines for white here in this position. From the games, it extracted from Megadatabase 2026. And we're already well into the second main variation, which is E5 for white here. And it's processing 600 games with E5. What it actually does is it characterizes the variation, tries to find strategic themes. It tries to find instructive games for you to replay when you want to learn the variation. This also needs a tiny bit of engine analysis, and it extracts tactical position. Okay, here we go. The opening report, of course, starts with a starting position here. And this is interesting because all the diagrams in this opening report are interactive, which means you can play around with them. You can toggle the board, you can go to the beginning of the variation. Not very interesting, but still you can replay here until the end, or you go to the end here. Well, that was a bit far, but doesn't matter. You can even show the notation of what you have here, and you can start an engine. The engine is actually quite powerful. You see it starts at ply 35 because somebody else has analyzed this obviously before on our server caches. Okay, next, of course, we have our echo classification. It tells us Sicilian Najdorf Poisoned Pawn, not very surprising. And everything in this opening report is clickable. Also, this link here would just list all the games found in our mega database, which start from this position. Next chapter is the history of the variation. Of course, if you're interested in opening theory, then you would like to know where this variation comes from. And here, this is obviously rose late 50s to the early 60s in the 20th century. And the opening pioneer here, identified by the opening report here, is Alexander Tolos. And he played some games, for example, in the USSR Championship against Mikhail Tal. He lost it, but still he employed this variation, maybe for the first time really seriously on top level. And if you look at the early adopters here, then we see, of course, Bobby Fischer. You might know that he was really a fan of the Poisoned Pawn Najdorf, and we can see if we click on the Fischer games here that he played this in important tournaments like the Interzonal in 62 or in the Capablanca Memorial against the contemporary top players. So for him this was a serious fighting variation. Scrolling down, I see an interesting chart which tells me the popularity development of this variation of our Poisoned Pawn over time. And we can see what we already discovered above, that it started in the 60s here, had a huge popularity spike, another spike in the early 1980s, and then it decayed to a normal level, to its normal statistic level, which it has nowadays. It's not completely out of fashion, but it's stable. It's still being played at all levels. still a popular opening, but the big fashion times are over. Nevertheless, if you see all the statistics, it's one of the main variations, of course, of the Najdorf. And the opening report tells us something about this in natural language. It tells us Queen b6 is going out of fashion because modern players prefer other continuations like, of course, Bishop e7 and interesting h6. So if our position goes out of fashion a bit, position after 9 queen a3, our starting position here, it doesn't mean that 9 queen a3 is less popular. Of course, it means that an earlier move is going out of fashion. Who are the main proponents of the variation? Strong grandmasters is white. We can see that there are strong players who recently played this, not very recently. We can see that Caruana played it, Giri played it, and you see the last year when this was being played, one of these top players, and we see, for example, from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, that he played a lot of games here, and as late as 2025. So this might be an interesting top player to look at if you study this. And then, of course, we have other notable players, maybe even down to IM level, who just play this variation a lot, and they're interesting for you if you want to look at this. Okay, so much for the history and for the players of this variation. Now we get to the statistics. Really a lot of statistics, and let me draw your attention to this graph here, to this heat map of the overall score. And this shows something which is visible everywhere in the opening report. We split statistics as far as possible by playing strengths. And this gives really interesting different insights into an opening statistics, into an opening variation. You see, if you look at the live book, if you look at any reference search, of course you get score statistics for a move. But this score statistics is always integrated over all playing strengths. And the success of an opening variation reflected in its score might differ a lot at which playing strengths this variation is employed. For example, here you can see that it's black's perspective here, because the key move leading to our position is 9 queen a3. And if both players in the game have an Elo rating above 2600, so are strong grandmasters, then the score from black's perspective is 43%, which is slightly below what you would expect ideally for black. And I think it has to do with that I included blitz games. Maybe I shouldn't have done this, but okay, we generated it now. And you can try this by filtering out the blitz games in the first dialog. And so black is okay, but slightly less. Better would be 45 to 46%, which is the normal expectation for black for any opening variation. 55% for white is just white's first mover advantage. But look at the other playing strength levels. It gets different. If we have, for example, club player level, then this variation is more successful for black. It's not very drastic in this system. In other systems, you can see there are huge differences. Look at the Scandinavian, for example. Great for black on club level, horrible for black on top level. Look at the Berlin defense for black. Very good for black at top level, a nightmare for black at club level. And this is very interesting. You see, in normal opening theory, everything is influenced by the games of the strong players. Those games get published. You see them if you follow live tournaments on the net. You see them in the magazines. You see them in the opening books. You see them in the videos about chess theory. Of course, this makes sense because the strong players are strong, so they get close to the objective truth of a variation. But what you are really interested in, what are your practical chances with an opening variation at your level? Is a variation difficult to play for a club player because it involves very subtle defense schemes like the Berlin defense also? Or is it pretty aggressive maybe for black and thus difficult for white to play? Marshall comes to mind as an example. Marshall is a nightmare. Marshall attack in the Spanish is a nightmare for white club players. Try it out, or we might try it out later together here. This is really, really interesting. It's okay for white grandmasters. They can play this, and it's quite okay, even though it's avoided many times nowadays. But if you look at the Marshall for black club players, you should really play this with black. Okay, so to sum it up, we split up all statistics by strength. So another statistic here is the popularity of this move, or of the whole variation, Queen A3, again split up by Elo range. Pretty interesting, because obviously stronger players really like this move much more than weaker players, relatively. So this is played at top level a lot over time, but not at club level. Maybe because it involves a lot of theoretical knowledge, which you really have to drill yourself. Then you could look at the score, and you can see that the drawing width here, this gray bar in this histogram, gets wider the stronger the both opponents get. You have a pretty big drawing width of 54% if both opponents are above 2600, and the weaker the opponents get, the smaller the drawing width, which is quite normal, because well, there are more tactical problems in those games, and they are decided more often by tactical things than at top level. Okay, let's go further and look at the choices of white in the heat map for moves here, which again splits up every move, every popular move in this position. The four of them, F5 is dominating, and it splits up the score for this move by playing strength again. And it's quite clear, you can already see this here. This information would be available to you in older versions of ChessBase, of course. The average score over all levels. F5 is more successful than E5. And you see, this is true. This holds across all Elo levels. And again, you could click here, for example, and see, okay, is it really true that 2600 players score 65% with white here? And I click on this. Then I get those games. First of all, let's have a look at the Elo distribution. Okay, this is 2601 to 2819, and also for black, I sort this color. You can see it's actually, the games here are in the range. And if I do statistics here by clicking in the list and hitting S, then I can see this white score. So the opening report is not lying about the good white score here. And I can see all those games, but I can also see that I included blitz games. Maybe this makes quite a difference, and we might have clearer results without all this noise of all those blitz games, which introduce the statistical random factor. Okay, next statistics. A lot of colorful statistics, but it gives you nice insights into an opening, is to see, okay, we have these various continuations for white, and in which playing strengths group are the different moves popular. For example, if you look at E5 here, then we can see that from all the people playing E5, the strong players, here violet, 2600 plus, dominate. So there must be something about this move. This is an interesting indication that strong players are not afraid to play E5. The normal players, of course, stick to the theory, the F5 move. So much for the statistics, colorful statistics. Now we get to the chess. Main lines and responses. Okay, we have all main lines for white. We already saw this here, ordered by number of games. We start with F5. And something interesting introduces this chapter on F5 here. It's called the characterization of this variation. Looks at all those 1128 games, which with 10 F5, and it tries to extract common strategic themes. It tries to describe the character of the variation. So if you know your positional player, of course you know that the poisoned pawn is the sharp variation, but this confirms it. It tells you can expect very few short draws. No wonder. White sacrifices a pawn. Yeah, we know that. It's the poisoned pawn variation. The queens stay on the board. Pretty interesting for fighting players. White and black tends to sacrifice a lot in those games. Quite clear, sharp games. We have a sharp middle game. No wonder. We have a low king safety for white and a low king safety for black. You'd expect that. We have a strong white knight. Often this might be the knight going from c3 to e4, maybe even later to d6 or so, though that's a strong white knight here. And of course we have weak white pawns. Just look at the white queen side. And we have weak black pawns because black's center gets torn open. Again, we have the notable players of this variation with both colors. And then we come to the list of the responses to our main line, main responses by black, sorted again by number of games. And you can see this is all visualized here. So you see there's a lot of information in this opening report, and we try to visualize it nicely so that you are not overwhelmed by thousands of numbers, percentages, and moves and everything, confusing, a lot of information. We try to structure it clearly. And you can notice this in the little details. For example, 10 knight c6 is obviously the main move, and it has more than 1,000 games here. So this is a big blue badge here, much bigger and more colorful than this 94 games, or even the gray 39 games here. Little subtle things. Also the frequency again is visualized here, that it tells you, okay, 85% of the games are being played with that, and the other moves are real sidelines. You can ignore them. We click on the typical lines section. This is folded away in the default report because it takes a lot of space. And even here we have further foldings. And the typical lines are lines extracted from those 1,000 games, and where we can say, okay, we can cluster those variations, and we very often arrive at this position here. You can, of course, replay this variation starting with f5 knight c6, main response. We just play through this line and we see, aha, okay, this is how black's pawn center gets torn open and how black's king safety gets pretty shaky. Of course, you can download this here, but this is not so interesting. It's the replay thing is the most interesting. Okay, so you have this very frequent line, which as somebody preparing for this here should definitely look at, 480 games. And you have some statements about this line. Statistics, statistics, statistics. Of course, you can have Elo statistics here by hovering on this little heat map. We ignore this for now, but you have something cool here. It's this frequently played statement. It tells you something about frequent moves which are not fixed in the line. They happen at some stage in the game past this key position here. And you can see that white often plays knight to e4. I think that's a pretty theoretical move. Bishop e2. And you see the full white setup here. And castles. Why does castling have an exclamation mark? It means that the games containing this castling, short castling of kingside castling of white, that they tend to have a better score expectation than the other games. So it's trivial here, but sometimes it can be pretty interesting. And if you look for typical plans in a variation, I mean, this is something we all want to do. We want to understand the plans. How should I set up my pieces, and what plan should I have? And you see, and this gives you strong hints about your ideas in this position. So white castles kingside, doesn't matter when, it just has to be in vicinity of this key position. And black plays h5, interesting, or f5, often in this position. So much, so clear. Moves, you can learn them by heart, necessary but also stupid. but you really want to understand what's going on in the position. You want to understand the motives. You want to follow what good players do in this position. And for this, you click on the hidden study games section, which will offer you 22 study games here, starting with the instructive games and followed by the short games. Instructive games are split into two columns, grouped into two columns. They are the wins, actually wins of black. Why wins of black? Because this section is the section for 10 knight c6, and so it's seen from black's perspective. So we have all those wins of black, and then we have losses of black. And those games are instructive. Why? A strong player beats a weaker player. So Novikov beats Mr. Vrabic with 2100. And it's not just that Novikov beats Vrabic, he beats him in a convincing way. And this is detected by the engine while generating the opening report. There are some short engine evaluations which take a bit of time, which establish that, in this case, black is okay after the opening, and that black's advantage increases after the opening, and then he practically outplays his or her opponent. And we can assume that such a game where a strong player outplays a weaker player out of the opening, that they tell you something about the handling of the opening of both players. So those games will be instructive. They will tell you how a strong player pushes through his ideas and his motives, and how the weaker player might fail to defend correctly. And so you learn a lot about this variation. A great way to study an opening, much better than just learning variations. And of course, we have the entertaining short games. Here, only losses for black. This is pretty interesting. This would make me nervous as a black player here. You save beautiful, you can of course click on all those games here. Bill Hartson beating Svetozar Griseric in the 60s in Christmas Congress in Hastings, and Chaka, yeah, very nice. And this is just entertaining. Just replay those games, have fun. It's good fun. Okay, so we just had this very first variation of this very theoretical line in the Poisoned Pawn, and next variation, slightly different. Again, you have study games, a bit less because there are less games, and so on and so on. So this is the way variations are presented in the opening report. I can fold this away, and I see, okay, I have these continuations. It continues in the same way with 10 E5, 600 games. You have your typical lines, your study games, and so on and so on. But let me now show you the maybe nicest or the most entertaining thing about the opening report, which I personally really love, and I always have to solve this if I see this. You see, at the bottom of this section on 10F5, you have the tactics. 29 positions here. White to move 24, black to move 5, which also is interesting. So there are 24 positions to solve with tactical ideas for white and only 5 for black. So white is here, white has more chances for tactics here. And so you can solve them right in this report. Of course, you could click here and load the game, but we won't do this. And we can look at that, for example, what's happening here. We have this Kazakh game from the swim championship, and I'm not seeing this right away, so I click on the hints very nicely. Play a double attack. I think, okay, that's it. We play knight f6, and we get green check mark, which confirms that this is the correct move. And why is this correct? Because, of course, if we take here, then we have this little discovered attack on the queen, and we win black's queen. Okay, I could look at the notation of this and see, this is also correct. Or I could start again an engine and analyze this position if I'm not sure about the solution or if I might find an alternative good move. And this goes on and on for pages and pages. And if you solve all these tactics, and you see here, you always see this is the typical structure in the center of those F5, 10 F5 games. And okay, let's do this here. This is certainly, yeah, green check mark. Thank you very much. And here is a bug. We have to fix this. Don't know why this is. Okay. And yeah, you see again the same structure. Long story short, you can have a lot of fun with it. And it has a real practical meaning. Because if you solve 100 tactical positions in this opening, you get a good eye for all the motives which are possible, and you see them much quicker than your opponent, not only in online blitz, but also in over-the-board classical games. Fantastic and entertaining training feature. Thank you very much.